There's something undeniably different about people who grew up in the 1970s. They seem calmer under pressure, less shaken by failure, and strangely comfortable being alone with their own thoughts. It's easy to dismiss it as nostalgia, but science suggests otherwise. Because the 1970s didn't just produce memories of bikes, tree climbing, and staying out until dark. It produced a psychological blueprint for resilience. Back then, children weren't constantly supervised, entertained, or protected from discomfort. They solved their own problems, managed their own conflicts, endured boredom, took real risks, and waited patiently for rewards. What felt ordinary at the time was actually shaping executive function, emotional regulation, social intelligence, and grit at a neurological level. In today's hyper-connected world of instant gratification and overprotection, that kind of upbringing feels almost radical. So what exactly did that generation experience that made them mentally tougher? And what can we learn from it now? Stay with me, because what we're about to uncover might completely change how you see childhood, resilience, and even modern life itself. 1. Freedom-built executive function and creative intelligence. Children of the 1970s grew up in an environment that prioritized freedom over supervision. At 7 years old, they were sent outside with a simple instruction: be home before dark. There were no smartphones, no GPS tracking, no scheduled play dates curated by adults. Instead, there were neighborhoods, bicycles, trees, and imagination. Entire afternoons were spent building forts, inventing games from scratch, and negotiating rules without adult intervention. This unstructured play was not neglect, it was trust. Neuroscience now confirms what that generation experienced firsthand. Free play strengthens executive function. Executive function is the brain's ability to plan, adapt, solve problems, and self-regulate without external direction. When children create their own games, resolve their own conflicts, and manage their own time, their brains develop neural pathways linked to independence and innovation. Without constant adult mediation, they learned to think critically. When boredom struck, they didn't reach for a device. They invented something new. When a disagreement arose, they negotiated solutions. This cultivated mental flexibility and resilience. Modern parenting often assumes that more structure produces better outcomes. Yet, the 1970s experience suggests the opposite. Too much intervention can weaken a child's ability to self-direct. Freedom forced creativity, autonomy built competence. And those long, unsupervised afternoons quietly wired a generation for problem-solving strength that many experts are only beginning to understand today. 2. Survival awareness and social intelligence. Growing up with minimal supervision required children to become highly observant. They learned to read environments quickly: who was home, which neighbor tolerated shortcuts across the lawn, which older kids were welcoming, and which were not. This wasn't anxiety. It was adaptive awareness. Without adults narrating every social interaction, children developed what psychologists now call hypervigilant social awareness. They read tone, facial expressions, posture, and subtle shifts in group dynamics. They understood that what people say and what they mean are not always identical. They became students of human behavior simply because they had to be. When conflicts emerged at the park, there was no referee. If someone didn't show up, they interpreted the situation themselves. If feelings were hurt, they repaired relationships through direct communication. These experiences strengthened emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills. Modern children often rely on adults to mediate social disputes. In contrast, 1970s kids practiced negotiation daily. They learned when to push back and when to compromise. They recognized leadership patterns within groups and adjusted accordingly. This hands-on social training created adults who can sense tension in a room, detect insincerity, and navigate complex relationships with nuance. What appears today as strong intuition was forged through necessity. Independence sharpened perception, and constant peer-driven interaction developed social competence that remains deeply embedded decades later. 3. Solitude, boredom, and emotional self-regulation. Afternoons alone after school were common. Children let themselves into empty houses, made snacks, did homework, and managed several hours independently. These experiences fostered competence, not loneliness. Each quiet afternoon reinforced a powerful belief: I can handle things on my own. When boredom surfaced, parents rarely intervened. The response was simple: go find something to do. With no instant entertainment available, children sat with discomfort. Eventually, imagination filled the gap. Boredom became a catalyst for creativity, rather than a crisis to be solved. Research now shows that periods of understimulation activate areas of the brain associated with innovation and self-reflection. In the 1970s, boredom trained the brain to generate ideas without external input. Emotional challenges were handled similarly. If a child failed a test or argued with a friend, they couldn't instantly text for reassurance. They lay on their beds, stared at the ceiling, and felt the emotion fully. Over time, they learned that emotions are temporary. Anger fades, embarrassment softens, disappointment passes. This built emotional self-regulation, one of the strongest predictors of adult success. They did not suppress feelings, they processed them internally. As adults, they often demonstrate calm under stress because they learned early that discomfort is survivable. Solitude strengthened identity. Boredom sparked imagination. Emotional independence became second nature. 4. Risk, failure, and calibrated resilience. Climbing tall trees, riding bikes without helmets, jumping into unknown water, risk, was part of daily life. Yes, there were scraped knees and occasional broken bones, but through experience, children developed an internal calibration system for danger. They learned the difference between fear and real risk. They understood how high was too high and how fast was too fast. Instead of avoiding risk entirely, they practiced evaluating it. Psychologists call this a calibrated sense of risk. Confidence rooted in lived experience. Failure was equally formative. Losing games, receiving poor grades, forgetting lines in a play. These moments were not softened by participation trophies. Children felt disappointment fully. Then they tried again. This normalized failure as feedback rather than identity. Falling down was expected. Getting back up was required. Without constant adult rescue, they developed resilience through repetition. Today, many adults struggle with rejection or setbacks because failure feels catastrophic. For 1970s kids, failure was familiar territory. They had survived it countless times before. This created a deep internal voice that asks, what can I do differently next time? Risk built courage. Failure built grit. And resilience became not a motivational concept, but a practiced skill embedded through childhood experience. 5. Delayed gratification and quiet confidence. Waiting defined much of childhood in the 1970s. Favorite TV shows aired once a week. Christmas came once a year. Desired toys required saving money over time. Anticipation was part of the reward. This slower rhythm trained the brain for delayed gratification. Modern psychology confirms that the ability to postpone pleasure correlates with higher academic achievement, stronger relationships, and lower addiction rates. Yet this generation didn't consciously train for it. They simply lived in a slower world. Waiting created appreciation. Anticipation amplified joy. Effort preceded reward. Now, decades later, many from that generation apply these principles in parenting and life. They resist overprotecting their children because they understand that struggle builds strength. They prioritize competence over comfort. They allow manageable risks and encourage problem solving rather than immediate rescue. This produces a quiet confidence, an internal assurance that challenges can be handled. Their resilience is not loud or performative. It is steady, rooted, durable. Freedom rewired their brains. Boredom fueled creativity. Risk sharpened judgment. Failure strengthened perseverance. Waiting cultivated patience. Together, These experiences forged a psychological resilience that feels increasingly rare in a hyper-connected world. And perhaps they remind us that the greatest gift we can offer the next generation is not protection from difficulty, but the strength to navigate it independently. What makes the 1970s generation so resilient wasn't luck, and it wasn't easier times. It was freedom. It was boredom. It was risk. It was failure. It was waiting. All the small, ordinary moments that quietly built independence, emotional strength, and unshakable confidence. In a world that now tries to remove every discomfort, maybe the real lesson is this: resilience isn't taught through protection. It's built through experience. If this video brought back memories or gave you a new perspective on strength in childhood, take a second to support the channel. Hit the like button so more people can discover this message, and subscribe for more deep dives into psychology, generations, and the hidden forces that shape who we become. Because sometimes, understanding the past is the key to building a stronger future.